So obviously I said we'd follow up with the local elections, but at the time that I am doing this, only one council has reported any results. So there's no point me really talking about any of that stuff yet, but don't worry, we will get to it. Yes, we're gonna have to at some point, but like I say, we'll wait till all the smoke's cleared. Obviously, Reform won the Runcorn by-election by 6 votes, so that is by no means a safe seat for Reform. If you won it on that smaller margin, that is very, very, very much a deadly seat for them to lose at the next general election. Again, we'll have to see. It is, of course, a warning for Labour. Some of the stuff that I am hearing from some of the people that I know that have been out campaigning, the big thing that is turning people is not immigration, which again, I know what a lot of people think, it's the winter fuel allowance still. You have a lot of old people who are the most motivated to go out and vote in these types of contests, are going out basically to give Labour a kicking because they lost their winter fuel allowance. From what I am hearing, that is the situation. We'll see what eventually happens elsewhere, but until everything's all come in, there's no point talking about it all just yet. But I do want to talk about a continuing trend that is seeming now to come forward. And that is, of course, well, now you've got someone like Andrea Jenkins that's won her mayoral election seat. You've now got the situation where we've been saying for quite a while, what happens if Farage wants to share the spotlight? Farage does not share the spotlight. Full stop. You saw that with the whole Rupert Lowe stuff, right? Andrew Jenkins is not exactly a wallflower. So it is now inevitable that sooner or later they're going to clash. Not only that, but you can bet every single other party is going to have a magnifying glass out looking for any mistakes or anything like that that goes on in these councils or, again, in Jenkins' back garden, and it is going to get magnified. Because, oh boy, there is a position where first time in its life, it's actually got responsibilities, actually has to do stuff. That is where it's all going to come off. That is where the wheel is going to come off the cart. Always with the situation, always what we said. And hey, even if they do end up winning the next election, they will lose. They will lose the next one because they will perform so badly that they cannot handle scrutiny. They cannot handle when it is actually comes to being in power. You are going to see some of this stuff. And I intend to amplify that stuff as much as I can because, oh boy, it ain't going to go well. It ain't going to go well, especially when Farage, as I've said before, thinks he can somehow control all these councillors from like the Reform HQ's office in London. Good luck with that. But anyway, I want to get on into this because this is something, a trend that is now very much starting to, a lot of people are saying that Farage and Reform have now basically planted their own seeds for destruction in all this. That winning was not actually what Farage wants. He just wants to be a protest party. He wants to be able to whinge and basically say, oh, wouldn't things be so much better? But once you're in power, you can't say that anymore because you are now in power. You actually have to, rubber meet road type thing, and yeah, there is probably going to be a lot of stories that come out just how bad some of these people are. And like I said in the past, Google the UKIP councillor suspended, and I guarantee you, give it a couple of weeks and we'll be getting a long list of Reform councillor suspended. Anyway, before we go on into this, please do remember to click the like, share, and subscribe button down below. Of course, there are links to my Patreon page, the One Updation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee, the YouTube thank you button, and of course, as always, there's the Pony Club down below as well. So, let's go cracking on then into this. This coming from the Herald. with the title of Farage and Reform have already planted their seeds of their own destruction. So, 9 years ago, in the wake of the Damascus Brexit referendum result, I began to research a punitive biography of Nigel Farage. The fulfillment of then the UK Independence Party's leader's lifetime political ambition had him now being talked about as the most consequential British politician since Margaret Thatcher. And despite his virtual omnipresence on the political scene in one way or another for a generation, very little was known about him. It was, of course, a surprise to me why, despite the arcane of the news reporting about Farage and his party over the years, a biography had not already, of course, been written. But behind all this bluff and straight talking and no nonsense anti politician exterior, there was a very complex personality riddled now with half truths and contradictions. Throughout all this media coverage, there was the very same periodic gossip, from claims of him singing Nazi songs at school, which he denies, to questions about his running now for his party and its finances and his complex private life. The reasons now for all the absence now from bookshelves soon became very clear, that publishers just weren't interested. People who read books often have no desire to actually learn more than their grubby purview when the ubiquitous Rothermans fang pin and out a very warm English bitter that they insist. Even, of course, political geeks and the anoraks would not, of course, be parted with their cover price now for a book of self-promoting opportunist who, in time, in any case, had already now passed. There was even more, of course, than a hint of snobbery in their blanket rejection. But as the gatekeepers now to literary world, particularly, of course, its finances, I recognized that they knew something would, or of course, that would not fly. I have been reminded of this repeatedly by a slew of other articles predicting that as leader of now the embryonic Reform Party, Farage could, of course, be the next UK Prime Minister. With, of course, its current tally of just 4 MPs and no leadership record at any level of government, there is, of course, a very heavy sense of cart before the horse in all these reports. Pollsters, for their part, have taken to questioning voters about their thoughts on the likelihood of Reform being the next occupant of number 10, without actually providing any guiding detail as to how he might get there. And again, I think that is another thing that needs to be talked about. That when you do look at these polls, it's not exactly still good. And yeah, obviously, we're going to have to update, my win total. But always remember, if they do not pass, if they cannot pass that UKIP mountain of 500, why on earth should we still take them seriously as a political threat? They are just now a political outside party that is still going to be there as a party of protest on the right. Why should you take them seriously? And honestly, they are still in that. Even on this morning when I'm doing this, that is still there. That is still there. I am still not worried about reform. I'm still not worried about reform because there is a lot of stuff that will go wrong for them. A lot of stuff that will go wrong with them, especially when you look at what is probably going to be in the Reform Manifesto. It's not going to be, shall we say, too appealing to a lot of other people. Not only that, but there is a very much a disliked aspect to Nigel Farage in the UK. And that will galvanize a lot of people to vote tactically at the next election. I can tell you that now. So, nevertheless, of course, with the benefit of such an unthinking reputation, the suggestion now is, of course, slowly but surely gaining a narrative traction. Propelled just by noise and hot air over substance, it bears all the very same playbook hallmarks of a typical Farage campaign. From a benchmark of gaining 15% of the vote at last year's general election, Reform now has progressively improved its standing now in subsequent polling. The most recent activity by pollers has the party tracking levels of support ranging from 21 to 28%. Labour, pardon me, Labour now from a base of 35% last June is now polling between 20 and 27%, while the Conservatives have been recorded around 20 to 25. The latter figure is, of course, down 1%, of course, on their general election showing. Whilst, of course, opinions vary, it is estimated that Reform could form the largest party at Westminster at the next election if it was able to secure at least 28% of the vote. But that proposes that the party and its leader continue to maintain the very same level of popularity they currently enjoy without any improvement from either the Labour or the Conservatives. And once again, this guy forgets, well, what about the Lib Dems, you know? At the current moment, only one council's reported, and Lib Dems have gained. You know, everyone forgets about the Lib Dems all the time. And I think Ed Davey is going to have, I think, a good result. Like I say, we'll see when all the dust is cleared, when all the numbers have been tallied up. That will probably be Saturday when we have a look at those stuff at the moment. Like I say, at the time I'm doing this, there's no point reporting about the stuff until it's all done and said. So we'll see. Where are we? So typically, of course, opposition parties require now to be significantly ahead of the government party to have any hope, of course, of replacing it. Reform appears to be riding very high at this early stage of the electoral cycle, but it is still neck and neck with a deeply unpopular Labour government, which still has 4 years now to improve its position. And bear in mind, this current government, they've done a lot of good stuff. People just have yet to actually feel the benefit of it. Not only that, in manifesto promises, they've ticked off 10 manifesto promises and things they wanted to do. They are the most productive government we have had in a long time. In a long time. So I think a lot of this stuff is going to take a while to filter through because they're not as bad as people say they are. I think they've done a lot of good stuff. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff I'm not happy with them doing, but as I've said before, there's no such thing as a perfect government. But there you go. The Conservatives, of course, meanwhile, are expecting a very low watermark under even their now out-of-favour leader, Kimmy Badenoch. In Scotland, the First Minister appears now to fall into the trap of talking up the chances of Farage and Reform ahead of next year's Holyrood election. His recent now covering of a small summit of Civic Scotland to now collectively consider the threat posed by populist interlopers have seen some commentators speculate that it may be now even counterproductive ruse to now try and squeeze votes from his main rivals. Whatever his motives, John Sweeney now risks ending up with egg on his face by lending credibility to a figure who is temporarily and institutionally now ill-equipped for a mainstream political leadership role, never mind the PM. Farage, of course, hopes to emulate the role model and mentor Donald Trump, who has managed now to overturn American political orthodoxy by posting as now an anti-establishment outsider. Despite, of course, having the advantage now to operating in a presidential system where it is now easier now for a charismatic individual to exploit or even his own personal appeal, Trump had to work within the establishment two-party system to actually succeed. In contrast, Farage is operating in a parliamentary system where electors vote for constituency candidates, and that would have to upend more than a century of convention by becoming the first leader of an insurgent party to gain the largest number of seats. And that is very true. We live in a parliamentary system where, once again, you are going for the seats. What Farage and, quote, wants to do, very unlikely to happen. Like I say, I am still not worried about Reform. I'm still not worried about them. Even then, of course, it is still likely that he would have to work in coalition with the Conservatives, who, in agreeing to such an arrangement, are very aware that they would be sounding their own death knell. Again, very, very true. We've talked about this a couple of times on the channel about that. But the biggest obstacle to Farage becoming PM is, of course, Farage himself, and in particular, his gargantuan ambition. Whereas Trump revels in his role of arch outsider and disruptor in chief, Farage has spent his entire career itching to be on the inside as an integral partner of the same establishment he now professes to despise. While he is seen as the inherent resemblance now and willingness to compromise as an attribute, it is for a politician like him anything but. For the point at which he begins now to negotiate, bargain, and deal to now soften his position as necessary, preparatory now to even grease his path into the office, will be when he and the party lose any semblance now of their self-created identity, surrendering any advantage they currently have. The reality is that Farage and everything he stands for is a mirage that vanishes the moment any attention is paid to it. There are, of course, times when voters might give the impression that they admire politicians like him and that they believe his quick fixes and easy answers are now to complicated questions. But when they are asked to put their money where their mouth is and to put their cross on the ballot at the next general election, their interest now and his snake oil promises vanish as quickly as a hazy, vaporous image in the desert. And like I say, I think that's true. I think now, if they are, quote, winning big, as Farage has come out and said that they are now the main party of opposition, okay, are you prepared for that level of scrutiny? I don't think he is. Don't think he is at all. Remember, Farage has said a lot of stuff that can get him in a lot of trouble, that we saw even last general election, the whole Putin stuff that came out, and that lost him a lot of votes. A lot of votes. So he generally will not survive the level of scrutiny that might come after him now. Because people are going to start paying more attention, looking very closely, asking questions he doesn't like to answer. And he's going to start to be called out more. And that's not going to do very well for him. Not going to do well for him at all. And ultimately, I can see now, depending on how SOP today goes, I think you will probably see the Labour backbenchers certainly be demanding answers from leadership. Like, we want to see more progress on some of this stuff. So I think you're certainly going to see Labour realize, even though, again, they are doing a lot of stuff, you're going to want to, the backbenchers are now want to go and see some real impact. And I think you might maybe see some stuff get pushed forward, but we'll see what happens. Like I say, we'll see. But as always, pardon me, let me know what you think down below. And of course, we're waiting to see what the full results are going to be. So until then, we'll see you all next time.